Alright, thank you all for coming. Most of you probably know who I am because I feel like I know most of you, but for those of you who don't, I'm Kara Flynn. I'm the Special Collections Librarian at Reese Library. So we're located up on the 3rd floor, but today we're using the Reese room, which houses our rare book collection, because it's great, and also for ambiance purposes, this goes with Scandal a little bit better than our special collections space. So, just to kind of give you an idea of what our event today is about. So, as we have processed archival collections and special collections, Miranda and I have found a number of love letters in our collections, and so we wanted to do an event around those letters. So today, our readers will be reading from love letters dating from 1860 to 1968. We have all of the original letters on display, and we'll probably pause briefly in between readers, so if you want to like get up and come look at some of the originals. We have, let's see, I think like 12 different letters today. I will do a little spiel, kind of background information, give some context so that you kind of get what's going on in the narrative of the letter before each reader, and then I will introduce the reader of that letter. So, without further ado, our first reader will be David. He is a reference assistant in government documents here on the 2nd floor, and he will be reading the Vance Fulkerson letter. It's our earliest letter in our series of love letters. Dates to 1860, and this letter is signed by Z.B. Vance, that's Zebulon Baird Vance, and it is addressed to his cousin, Samuel Vance Fulkerson, and it discusses the elopement of his sister Hannah, who married a man named Edward W. Herndon. An elopement during this period, especially from a prominent family, would have been a scandal indeed. It's additionally scandalous because one of the other brothers in the family, there are 8 children in this family, one of Zebulon's brothers was actually the witness at this marriage, this elopement. So Zebulon Baird Vance was a Confederate military officer in the Civil War, and later the 37th and later the 4th governor? 37th governor of North Carolina and a U.S. senator. He has been called one of the most influential Southern leaders from the Civil War and postbellum periods, so he is kind of a big deal. 1860, we're like leading up to the Civil War period. Samuel Vance Fulkerson was Zebulon's cousin. He was a colonel of the 37th Virginia Infantry Regiment, and he would die in battle 2 years after this letter was sent. We don't know much about Hannah or her husband, Edward Herndon. Some sources have his name as Edmund, others have his name as Edward, so it's E. Herndon. And Hannah was the youngest of the 8 Vance children and would have been about 18 at the time of this elopement. Edward, or Edmund, was about 20 at the time. He was born in Virginia, and he served during the Civil War in the 19th Virginia Regiment as a private about a year after he and Hannah eloped. So I'm going to cede the floor to you.
Do I sit? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what the chair is for.
Well, Asheville, North Carolina, July 9th, 1860. To the Honorable S.B. Fulkerson, Abingdon, Virginia. My dear sir, I am sorry to write you under such sorrowful circumstances. My sister Hannah, the pride and pet, I may say, of the family, last night eloped with the most trifling and, I fear, worthless young man by the name of Herndon. They were married in town and set off for Virginia before we knew anything whatever of this intention. He hails, I think, from your state, somewhere about Wytheville. He had been here for some 12 months, following the business of some daguerreotypist, and so secretly was the intrigue conducted that but few of the friends we knew they were even acquainted. Little is known of the man here, and that little is not good. What on earth induced her to take such a step one cannot divine. She was highly educated and quite a sprightly girl, whilst he is an illiterate, low-bred fellow, scarcely able, I am told, to write his name. May God help her. We are all in great distress. My poor old mother's heart is almost broken, and I have seriously feared for her life. All the circumstances were attended by peculiar aggravation. Many persons thought to be our friends assisted in perpetuating this damnable outrage upon mother's peace and a poor girl's happiness. I have really felt astonished that I have been prevented from committing murder. When you go through this, my dear sir, you will feel as I do, that your cup of bitterness is drained to the dregs. Will you have the kindness to institute inquiries as to this young man's parents and let me know the result? Any intelligence as to their respectability, if favorable, would afford some consolation, though I am not led to hope for anything favorable. I cannot say more. My kindest regards to John, Martha, and Cousin Kate, and believe me, most sincerely yours, Z.P. Vance.
Thank you. All right. So, yeah. Our next letter is a little longer. Thomas Weeks will be reading this letter. He's one of our reference and instruction librarians. And he is reading the J.W. Call letter dated 1865, so right towards the end of the Civil War. Unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about this letter, J.W. Call, or his wife to whom he writes the letter. We do know that he was a corporal from South Carolina and fought for the Confederacy in the 3rd Battalion of South Carolina, also known as the Palmetto Battalion. He sent this letter from Bruton train station in southern Alabama near the end of the Civil War, which would end about a month and a half later. And actually, you'll see in this letter, but he receives his wife's letter to him on Valentine's Day, and this is his response to her letter.
My ever dear wife, February 17th, 1865, Bruton Station, Alabama and Florida Railroad. Your very welcome letter of the 31st of January came to hand on Valentine's Day, the 14th instant, and found me in reasonable health. I am troubled very much with sore eyes, the result of cold, I think, contracted from exposure. I have, as yet, used no remedy, as the isolated condition of our detachment cuts us off from medical attention. Lieutenant R. and myself were just wising on Valentine's morning that our respective widows in the Carolina would not forget us on this day of gilt-edged missives and amatory epistles. Imagine our gratification when an arrival from WPT brought each of us a letter, a real, genuine letter, and none of the unmeaning, missing, cowbush usually in circulation at this period. It is needless to say that we appreciated them. Several weeks have intervened since we had heard from our own time Valentines. Inasmuch as your letter reached me on a day of license in Cupid's domain, you certainly will not object if in reply I should indulge in a little sentiment. Notwithstanding, it may involve a temporary compromise of your sense of propriety of such ebullitions on the part of those who, according to your idea when united to the object of their heart, for a period of 10 years, should quietly nestle themselves down to a bounden consistency, never allowing a demonstration of feeling to rise beyond a given point in the thermometer of matrimonial joys. I do you no injustice, do I, in attributing the sentiment to you? Knowing your general aversion to lover husbands and sentimentalism, I have been extremely merciful and will here inflict only a brief summary in verse of feelings which the ardor of my nature is ever keeping alive as the green oasis of the desert, in contradistinction to the deadened and blighted aspirations of a heart that, perhaps, was framed all too sensitive, to rest with patience under a disruption of associations, wherein it found so much of sympathy. To my wife, I'm sighing for thee as the sun reclines, and twilight veils the western heaven, as the pale moon in matchless splendor shines, and daylight from the earth is driven. When makes the first dawn of another light, thine image greets my earliest thought. 'Tis thus ever at morn, noon, or night, my heart with memory of thee is fraught. Seldom is it, my dear Fanny, that I trespass upon the peculiar province of the sons of song, and yet there are far more appreciative of genuine poetry. In this instance, I have digressed from my usual beaten path of prose, and above you have the result. While the thoughts as expressed may lack the true rhythm of poetry, there is the redeeming trait of candor and truth in them, which your knowledge of my true feelings can but attest. As I have been trying my hand at doggerel recently, I have concluded to give you the subject, a dialogue between a love-smitten sergeant of our detachment and a fair damsel in the vicinity of Brenton. That you may the better appreciate the bearings of the lady's replies to his queries, I will promise by stating that in November last, this station was almost completely submerged by water. Dialogue. Gentlemen, I have kinder sorter fell in love with you. Lady, that was a terrible freshet we had in November. Gentlemen, but that is not what I was speaking of. Lady, Mrs. S. lost all of her fattening hogs. Gentlemen, can I pay my addresses to you? Lady, Mr. B's fence was entirely swept away. The joke got out, whereupon I composed the following, entitled, Love's Labor Lost. A gallant rev, though to fame unknown, laid siege to a maid, and aqueous gone. Noble essayed he to win the prize, yet little favor found in her eyes. Alone they walked from the sacred house, as with tremulous tongue he sought to rouse the latent spark within this fair daughter, whose sylvan home was lashed by water. Of love he spoke, and its tender train. He could not soothe water on the brain. With strange, erratic haste, forth she shot, in quest of ruin, the fresh had wrought. Again he charged with valor vain. He sank beneath the untimely rain, and to his soft, unbreathing tails came alone the clash of swimming nails. Quoth he, with water I'm growing blind, what need care I who's lost their swine? Interpose some great protecting power to save me from ruin by the shower. In the present disrupted state of our railroad lines in South Carolina and Georgia, I am doubtful about this reaching you in a reasonable length of time. Everything indicates that the war is to be prolonged, and I am apprehensive that we are yet to feel the dire calamity more keenly than ever the present year. I am fearful, from newspaper reports, that our loved Columbia is to feel the in-heel of the oppressor. I do not say this to alarm you unnecessarily. You are nearer the theater of war now than I am, and hence will have a better opportunity of judging of the facts in the case. By the time that a verbal report or verbal sport reaches me, it has smelled to such proportions that the originator would scarcely recognize its jib. We are at present leading a most indolent and inactive life. We do not drill any, and the sum total of my exercise consists in an occasional dance. I have grown almost corpulent. I weigh 160 pounds, more than I ever have. I am at present acting commissary sergeant for the detachment here, and visit Pollard every 4 and 5 days for the purpose of drawing nations. We had a gay dance night before last. Lieutenant R attended and seemed to enjoy himself extremely. I think that the party spirit is fast declining here, and do not anticipate pleasure from that source for some time to come. Give my kindest regards to all inquiring friends, and tell Mrs. Rowland that her liege lord is in extreme danger of being assaulted by a battery of bright eyes, commanded by a live widow, fair, fat, but not near 40. You can kiss her for me too if she's willing. Kiss the children for me, and tell them Pa is very anxious to see them. Tell Willie that he must study his book and learn how to read well by the time I get home. Tell Leona that Pa thinks of her day and night. When you write to Mother, tell Lizzie to be a good girl, and Pa will love her more and more. Oh, that I could hear her talk this morning and listen to her ringing laugh, as in her childish simplicity she relates some incident of her country home. Tell mother that I have written to her since I have been here, but have received nothing from her. Give her my love. As I could not fulfill your request in regard to Mrs. Lunas, I will kiss the live widow if you don't object. Accept my love and believe me, your affectionate husband, J.W. Call.
Thank you, Thomas. I know, it's a long one. So, kind of to debrief that one, because it does get super wordy. This man fancies himself a bit of a poet. The first poem he wrote to his wife, and the second that he calls a dialogue, is kind of like an imagined conversation he has between a local lady and the soldier who's trying to woo her, but all she can think about is the weather. So she just keeps talking about how much it's rained and the flood, and he's like, I'm trying to tell you I love you. She doesn't care. So, our next set of letters, we're going to be jumping forward in history from 1865 all the way to 1923 and 1924. So we're actually going to do a series of these letters. We're doing 4 of the Walker family letters. They're from our Walker family papers that were recently processed. And the author of these letters is Hugh McLean Walker. He was a lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy and the grandson of W.H.T. Walker, a Confederate major general who served in the Civil War and was killed in action during the 1864 Atlanta campaign. The Walker family is a prominent family in Augusta, and their rise to prominence in the area began with Freeman Walker, who was a United States senator, a lawyer, a member of the House of Representatives, and also the mayor of Augusta in 1818. And then again in 1819, and again in 1883. So H.M. Walker was first married to Elsie Dodge in 1906, and upon her death in 1925, he remarried to a Margie Bell Shackelford Twiggs. The letters are between these two people, Hugh Walker and Margie Bell. They're both married to other people
At the time.
And are having an affair. So Hugh's wife, Elsie Dodge, his first wife, is suffering from a long-term illness. There's evidence in the letters that she is in some kind of long-term care facility, like a hospital, but they call it an asylum because they didn't really have like long-term care setups in the 1920s. And we don't know a whole lot about Margie Bell's first marriage. We do know she has a few children with her first husband, and she ultimately gets a divorce from her first husband in 1924-25, which is pretty rare, pretty scandalous at the time, because Hugh's wife has died and she can now be with Hugh if she divorces her first husband. So that's kind of the background. So during the years that these letters were written, which is 1923 and 1924, they're in the midst of their affair. They do get married, and they seem to have a long-lasting second marriage. Their series of letters in our collection goes through the 1940s and onward. So despite its inauspicious beginnings, these two do seem to be able to sustain a long-term relationship after this, and they do go on to have additional children together. So, our reader for this letter isn't here yet. So I may go ahead and jump in on this one. All right. And we're going to have a series of people reading these, so I'll read this one. Miranda will read a few, and one of our student readers, Sean, will be reading another one. So, all right, Saturday, May 12th, 1923, midnight, underlined. My very own sweetheart, I love you so much tonight that it seems a pity to have to tell you so with an old pen nail. But I have to, as there is no ink and pen available. I would give my life to take you in my arms, my darling, and try to tell you just how I do love you. This afternoon, about 4, cannot bear my lonesomeness for you longer, so to town I went, and searched for you as I never have before. I must have gone a dozen times to the station, and so many times to Speth's. I called Bernice twice, and they said she was not, and finally, the 3rd time, that she had gone home. I thought if I did not see you, I would lose my mind. I rode up and down Broad Street until I was ashamed to look at the monument. I parked in front of Speth's, got arrested, and had to go to the police station. I was so worried and blue that I spoke crossly to the officer, and he showed me no sympathy. I felt like telling him my heart was breaking because I couldn't find you, but I knew he wouldn't appreciate it. I stood behind the popcorn stand and chimed, "Oh, ye whiskers," in an absented way, until he gave me a bag of popcorn as an invitation to be on my way. I passed Mr. Anton so many times that I am sure he must think that I have lost you for life. He really seemed sorry for me. I guess he knows the feeling. I came home at 7, and Mother invited Janet and me to go hear Creative's band at the Imperial. I went and felt as guilty as a dog that you were not with me. I felt as though I was cheating my precious sweetie. He's still married.
Not to her.
Not to her. Honey, there wasn't a minute, so help me God, that you were not on my mind. And I actually suffered for you. God only knows how I love you. I really can't see how I'm going to stand this separation. I can't stand it. Your letter was glorious, my darling, and it did make me so happy to be assured so beautifully of your love for me. We must arrange, and that as soon as possible, to be together again. Those days in Macon were as heaven to me, and they sealed my love forever for you. No matter what happens, and I look back upon them as the happiest, very happiest days of my life. You are a wonderful girl, my precious, and through the most trying days of my life, you held my love as though it were in a vice. And you possess a power of making me love you more and more and more, when it does not seem possible that I could love you more. In other words, darling child, you have absolutely absorbed me in love. I have never loved like this before, and I cannot think that I ever have been so loved. You are my very life, and in your heart I depend for my life's happiness and contentment. No matter what people say to you, my darling, love me. Let me love you. Don't have a thought that might mar or blemish our love. Stick to me, honey, and I swear before the God above us that I'll stick to you. I know in my heart that you missed me terribly this afternoon and wanted to see me. I have never in my life felt as I did, and would have crawled to the North Pole just for one look at my beautiful sweetheart. God bless you, my very soul. I love you. Yours, absolutely yours, Hugh. Yes.
Do you know how old they were?
He is substantially like 12 years older than her. She's in her 20s at this point, and he's in later 30s.
Because I was noticing the child, my child, and I'm like,
Yeah. And I don't know how much of that was just
I know.
a weird pet nanny type of thing at the time, but all right. So now Miranda is going to read our next Walker letter.
So there are 4 of these, and she did give you background already about the Walker family. So he was indeed having an affair with Margie Bell, and also if you hear the name Janet, that is his sister. So apparently she was meddling in his affairs, both business and otherwise. And I don't know if she's mentioned a lot in these letters, but in the entire collection she is. So I processed this collection not too long ago, and there are literally 2 boxes full of letters just like this. I mean, it's every month of 1923 and every month of 1924, and then it goes straight on through the 1940s. So he's to say the least, yeah, he's Head over heels.
So Miranda will read this next one, and then our student reader, Sean, will read one after that.
So, this one says August 27th, 1923. My own darling, yesterday morning when I left you, I'll say it took some determination to keep on going. I didn't want to leave you, and as each mile separated us, my desire to turn back was 1 mile stronger. It is very lucky, though, that I came because Elsie, his wife, made arrangements to have an operation on her throat this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Contingent upon my being here, I could not write you last night. So telegraph her, I hope the message reached you safely. The trip up here was the very meanest I ever made. To begin with, the roads from Augusta to Greenwood, ever hideous, and from Greenwood on, the roads were fine. But I never saw so many cars, nor have I ever been so completely smothered by dust. Upon arriving, I don't exaggerate when I say I was as brown as Josephine and clothes ruined. I arrived at the house about 8:20 and found the little girls about ready for bed. They were precious in their delight in seeing me. Miss Dodge, also his wife, seemed pleased. Of course, I did not go to the sanatorium last night. Sanatorium, or sometimes asylum, they would say it's like a hospital. His wife was saying in a hospital. I went there this morning and found Elsie cheerful and well situated. Her condition is about the same. I then went downtown and saw Ringer and left my ruined suit to be steamed, etc. I'm going to jot down times I arrived at various places. Left Augusta, 9:45. Arrived Edgefield, 11 o'clock. Greenwood, 1 o'clock. Greenville, 3:45. Hendersonville, 6:40. Asheville, 7:45. I stopped 10 minutes at Greenwood and took 3 gallons of gas and a quart of oil. I stopped at Greenville 15 minutes, took 2 gallons of gas, 1 quart of oil, 2 hot dog sandwiches, 1 bottle of Budweiser, and 11 slices of raisin pie. And promptly, 11 slices. And promptly wished I had drunk the gas and oil. The hot dogs and especially the pie. When I got to Asheville, the trees had nothing on me when it came to air pressure. Nothing in the way of accident or incident occurred en route, except one of those devil curves. The floorboard dropped down and jammed low gear and foot brake, and for an instant, Gabriel's trumpet sounded a shrill note in my dusty ears, and my heart gurgled against my dust-laden lungs. I looked white, even though my gingerbread complexion, ... Meeting Big Papa coming down the street with Warren chasing me with a butcher knife? ? Lulled me to sleep after feeling as I did. As soon as I got here, Miss Dodge said, "Oh, what do you think the Colonel?" Miss Dodge is coming down and I'm not going back until the 5th. My heart sunk, but Johnny on the spot I said, I have to get back on September 1st to keep an appointment with the Brand of Education, as I have an appreciation for position in Richmond Academy, and all applicants are by law required to appear before the board to be questioned and thereby furnished evidence of ability, etc., in order that the board may select those best fitted, etc., etc. And also Miss Walker, most positive that should by all means she would return. Honey, you and Janet have made an ... out of me, and when I pull me a whopper, in quotation marks, my plans are to leave here Friday with Susie, arriving in August late Friday night or early Saturday. My sweetheart, I can't begin to tell you how much I love you and how much your love for me means to me. It is the guiding light of my life, and every thought and ache on my part finds its beginning and ending in you and my love for you. You are with me every second of the time, and often when you are thinking of me, the strong bond of love that exists between us seems to bring you close enough for me to touch. You are the very last thought I have at night. I am conscious of you through the night, and as I awaken in the morning, my very first impulse is you. I swear to this. I love you, my darling. God knows I love you, and have loved you as intensely as I do, longer and more constantly than I ever have loved before. I couldn't nor would I want to live without you, and I am positive you feel the same towards me. So let's take pains, my own darling, to live for each other always. I know I have hurt you terribly at times, but when you thought, as you have often said, I would sell you for 5 cents, all the wealth and treasures on this earth would not tempt me, and to this I swear. Be absolutely sure, because I love you with all of my heart and some. God bless you, my own. Yours, Hugh.
Let some people come in and some people go out. And our next letter is another Walker letter, and it will be read by Juan Rose, one of our student readers. Excuse me, sorry.
January 8th, 1924. My darling, as you said this morning, I now say to you, I am numb and paralyzed as to what has happened. I saw you go away and knew my heart was and is still breaking. Really, the whole affair is more like a dream than any happening in my life. I pray God that you will be fortunate in your undertaking and that at least you will be more contented. This is going to be the hardest fight I have ever had in all my life, and were it not for the fact that you were so miserable at home, I could not bring myself to stand the separation. I am not so sure that I'm going to be able. God only knows what will happen. I'm totally lost without you, but I suppose the excitement of being on the choo-choo train and with Janet has made this 8th day of January somewhat easier for you than it has been for your sweetie who loves you so. After I left you, I went to the office and found that George Robinson had just called from Gardell's and wanted to see me. I went around, found him, and rode over the hill with him, going for Walker at 12:30. I found William Henry there. William Henry took Walker home, and Miss Emma came in for other children. I went home for dinner and left at 5 to come in for Father. I have fought every single minute of this day. You have not been out of my thoughts for a single second, and as night draws near, I want you all the more. I love you, honey. Don't ever think I don't. Give Jay my love and tell her to take good care of my sweetheart. You take good care of her, for whom will I say, except for all of us. Good night, my precious precious sweetheart. I love you. Always love me as you do now, and count on me through life. Yours, Hugh. I adore you.
At what point did they get divorced and get married?
1925.
1925, after the Elsie Dodge, the first wife of Hugh, dies. But we're going to end our Walker series on the first wife finding out about the mistress.
Ooh.
So Miranda's gonna read us that letter.
So, if you've noticed in some of the other letters, he refers to his wife as Mrs. Dodge, or Mrs. Walker, or Elsie. But, yeah, he has different names for her. January 10th, 1924. My darling, I was made happy today by receiving your long and newsy letter. I'm so glad that Mrs. Woodbury could accommodate you both, and I am equally glad that those you have seen appear so anxious to help you. You really should get something worthwhile if Dr. Graham interests himself in your behalf. I guess that you could plainly see that I have been financially able to accompany you, that I most certainly would have been a hindrance rather than a help in securing a position for you. It nearly broke my heart not to go with you, but I fully realize how much better in every way for me to remain here until you become established. Mrs. W. had a plain talk with me this afternoon and told me that she knew all about us and had been knowing it for months. I tried to get her to tell me who had told her, but she refused to say. She said that she fully expected that I would accompany you and Janet and wanted to know why I had not. She said, I guess you find it rather lonesome without your little Miss B. I said, what? She then said, you know what I mean. I let her do all the talking. And when she finished, I said, you seem to know about all, and you are dead right when you say I miss her. She wanted to know how long you were to be in Atlanta and why you left, etc., etc. I told her you were going to make Atlanta your home and that Janet probably would as well. She replied, well, when you leave for Macon again, I won't bother calling Mr. Dodge to find you. I said, no, that's right. When I leave again, I hope to be able to give you Janet's phone address in Atlanta. We both talked about everything jokingly, but someone has told her all. When you write me, advise me as to when, what to say, and what to do when I come up to see you. I intend telling her that I'm going down to the farm and leave the rest to her imagination. Don't let any of the above worry you, because it does not worry me in the least. It is now 6:30 p.m., and I will bring this to an end by telling you that I love you more than ever, and for our sake always love me as you do now. Give my kindest remembrance to Bernice and my love to Janet, and always know, my darling, that I love you and am yours, Hugh. Also, if anyone's interested in the Walker family, like beyond love letters, their family cemetery is actually here on the grounds of Augusta University. So it used to be the Arsenal, Augusta University, but he's buried in there along with his ancestors. So.
And Janet is his sister?
Yes,
His
Janet is his
sister.
sister.
So his sister is with his girlfriend?
Yes. So
They're friends.
they're friends.
Okay.
We don't have a ton of documentation about the women on this side of the love letters, either the first wife or the mistress and then the second wife. I can't find any record of her divorce, but we know that her husband lives until 1948, her first husband.
So
And they did get legally married in 1925, so she had to have been divorced at some point in that period, shortly after the first wife died. So, we're moving from one scandal of a prominent Augusta family to another scandal of a prominent Augusta family. This one is actually a little bit of a deviation for us. It's not a love letter, it's a court document, actually. So, this is the Penn and Peoples court case. This is part of the William Henry Fleming papers. William Henry Fleming was a politician and a very prominent lawyer in Augusta, and he represented a lot of prominent people in Augusta. And Tina will be, one of our library assistants, will be reading this one for us. So to give you a bit of background information, because this is a very formal, like legalese type of document, the two individuals in this case are listed as a Lulu May Penn and Isaac S. Peoples Jr. Although it's likely that Lulu is a typo and the woman's name is actually Lula May Penn. We found that in the city directories and census records. So Lula May Penn appears to have been a working class or perhaps lower middle class woman living in Augusta during the 1920s. According to the Augusta city directories, in 1923, 3 years before the date of this case in 1926, she was working as a clerk at J.J. Miller and Company and living at the local Young Women's Christian Association building. So if you're familiar with the YMCA, this is the YWCA. And that was a nonprofit organization that sometimes housed struggling women and children. By 1925, she was living at 921 Reynolds Street and still working as a clerk. Apart from these brief lines in the city directories and this court case, she is largely missing from our historical records. So this is all that we know about her. Isaac S. Peoples Jr. was born around 1880, making him 46 at the time of this case. In the 1917 book highlighting notable Georgians, Peebles was said to have been one of the best known and most popular lawyers in Augusta. So he is also a lawyer, but he's being represented by William Henry Fleming, a lawyer in this case. He was the son of a prominent merchant and planter from Gibson, Georgia. He was elected governor of Gibson twice, but resigned soon after his second election and moved to Augusta in around 1908. He married first in 1907 to Lois Cabinus, but had married Catherine Hall by at least 1920, when they appear in the census. In 1917, Peebles was the city attorney for the city of Augusta, and he was a member of nearly every fraternal organization in the city, including the Knights Templar. So he's a very important guy in the city of Augusta during this time period. So needless to say, there's a pretty intense power dynamic between these two people. So we will leave it up to you to decide whether Lula May is a victim manipulated by a very powerful man, or a woman who saw some financial benefits in potentially blackmailing this very powerful man.
Georgia, Richmond County. Whereas Lula Mae Penn contends that she has certain tort causes of action against Isaac S. Peoples Jr., which consist of seduction, breach of promise, and an abortion. And whereas said Mr. Peoples denies emphatically any and all such charges and contends that he has been heretofore, that's so weird, blackmailed in reference to said charges and has submitted to his making payments rather than be subjected to the publicity that would be attended upon the investigation of such charges, and contends that he holds receipts in full signed by said Lula Mae Penn. And whereas the said Lula Mae Penn threatens to prosecute further her alleged claims, and that's a lot of hands. Whereas the said Peoples would rather undergo the publicity that would be attended upon with such an investigation, although expressing no fear as to the outcome, has, in order to prevent such publicity, reluctantly agreed to make a compromise settlement of all alleged civil liability, which he contends is non-existent. And whereas the said Lula Mae Penn contends she is acting in good faith, and that she claims she makes are true, and the claims she makes are true, which is denied by the said Peoples. Now therefore, in consideration of $500 cash in hand paid her by Isaac S. Peoples Jr., receipt whereof is hereby acknowledged by the said Lula Mae Penn, hereby acknowledges full and complete satisfaction of all claims of whatever nature against the said Peoples, and hereby agrees that she will in the future cease to harass the said Peoples by constantly or frequently phoning his office and residence, and desist from harassing him in any like manner. The said Peoples, upon his own motion, as an express provision of this agreement, makes it understood that this shall not be constituted as an attempt to settle any alleged criminal charge that the said Lula Mae Penn may see fit to institute, all of which he is ready and able to defend, and it is expressly understood that this instrument shall not be construed as an admission on his part of any guilt, whether civilly or criminally, on the account of said alleged charges. Witnessed by my hand and seal on this 25th day of February 1926.
Sarah, did you do the conversion, like from 500, what is?
Oh, I have not done the conversion, actually.
Curious.
It's not, it's a substantial amount of money, but it's not a ton of money considering how wealthy this man is. So for him, the $500 in 1926 is kind of a drop in the bucket. It was probably a lot for her, especially considering that just 2 years before, or 3 years before, she had been essentially like living in low-income housing that was subsidized by this religious group. So essentially, just to kind of summarize all the legalese, there's a lot of like ands and heretofores and whereases in there. She says, this very wealthy married man, he made promises to me, he seduced me, and he forced me to have an abortion. And he says, nope, I did not. I paid you your money, and in paying you this money, I am admitting no guilt of anything at all, and we're done now. Like, you took your money,
Bye.
we're done. Like, don't call me, don't call my house, don't call my wife. This is the end of that. And we don't really see this come up ever again. So in the historical record, you can see tons of court documents that Isaac Peoples Jr. Was involved in as a lawyer representing someone in a case, but I don't think that this ever came to light. So it is likely that they settled out of court. I didn't see anything in the Augusta Chronicle about this during this period, so it seems to have been like kept very quiet. especially considering that he had previously been the city attorney for the city of Augusta. I mean, he'd been 2 times a governor of another Georgia city. So, yeah, he was a big deal. But yeah, so it's hard to tell from just this one document, and this is all that we have about this case, kind of where the truth lies there. We can't really make that distinction, so it's sort of like, I guess, up to whatever your gut feeling is after hearing that case. All right. We're gonna keep on trucking. So, okay. So next we have a series of letters from the William Henry Fleming papers. So this court case was also from this collection. That's from his business records part of his collection. But we also have, he goes into business with his son later when his son is an adult. And so we have a series of letters between the son, who is William Cornelius Fleming and goes by Cornelius, and Sadie Sibley, who becomes his wife. Sibley might sound familiar because of Sibley Mills. She often refers to herself as Saucy Sadie. So that will give you a little bit of a hint about kind of where she's at. So Sadie Sibley is the star of these letters, and she writes to her beau and future husband, William Cornelius Fleming, in 1929. The letters are part of William Henry Fleming papers. Unfortunately, we don't have any of Cornelius's letters back to Sadie, as is the case for a lot of our letters in our collections. We only get one side. So in this case, we're only getting Sadie's side of the correspondence. Sadie was actually her nickname. Her legal name is Sarah Virginia Sibley. She goes by Sadie, though. She is around 28 at the time that they're writing these letters to each other. Cornelius and Sadie married at some point in 1929, despite Sadie writing in January of 1929 that they wanted to wait a year to marry because of the economy. However, the birth of their first child in March of 1930 hints at the reason why they may have wanted to move up their wedding date. So, the first 2 Fleming letters are going to be read by Catherine Lynn, another one of our student volunteer readers, and they are both from 1929. So I'm going to let her take it away.
January 21st, 1929. Precious sweetheart, your telegram has just come. You are so sweet and thoughtful, but darling, you must save your quarters for loaf bread. You are just the sweetest thing, and I wish I could tell you so in my own way. I didn't sleep worth a dream last night and kept old Nib awake. Finally she said in a voice full of yawns, "Put it under the pillow, and then maybe you won't be kept awake." Oh, I love my ring and all it means. Just to think your mother gave you her stone for me. She is precious. Have you told them? And that we plan to wait a year for economic reasons. Gosh, Cornelius, old Patty Boy Brownie, has just had to tell all of her friends. News travels so fast. I wonder if he told the Upsons and the Holdens. I wrote Miss Mary and the judge and told them it was a secret, but we're so close to them we had to tell. Do you mind? I want you to tell everybody, my precious piece of perfection. Dr. Patton had pretended to be hurt. I told him that it was the first time I ever planned to get married, and he'd had to excuse my social church errors. I didn't think people told the preacher until they were ready to toll the bell. And a year was such a long old time. I've had a job offered me, camp counselor at the Rhino Market camps in the heart of Berkshire's Lake Ashmere Hinsdale, Massachusetts. What do you think of that as a summer outing? Major R.F. Purcell, our musical director on the Rydom, is our director of activities. And I received the offer this morning. Never rains, but it pours. Last summer, I'd have been wild to accept. There are enough miles between us and Carlsbad comes next to you. Your Brownie, Sally, Sadie, etc. My precious Red, Well after you left me, I dashed upstairs to my own little room and had it out with myself. I don't know what makes me act like that, but thank God it was the last time. Next time we leave together. I slept hard for nearly 3 hours. My headache left, and so I went to Atlanta with Miss Wilson, Pat, Jimmy, and Bill, and went by Uncle Nick's and see Aunt Sadie and plan the luau, ? It sounded lovely. She was mighty sweet, sweeter than I'd ever seen her. It was a horrid rainy night, but we had a cozy time. After we got back to Marietta, we parked in the drive and Pat told us vivid stories of the West. Jimmy is all primed to get married. I do hope a nice girl falls for him very soon. He's a sweet thing and has a pretty hard time. Tib is devoted to Chick. She thinks he's adorable. Asked that we keep an eagle eye and not to let him fly away until she too was up in the air. We were all stewing around. The new maid arrived this morning and Bruce telephoned that he was sick. Oh, the curse of drink. We all know it was that and nothing else. Pray that he will sober up very soon. Thinking about you, loving you too. Living until Saturday as in a stew. Then we'll be together and be, what rhymes with stew? I love you. Always yours, Sid. April 15th, 1829, at home.
Alright, I'm going to read the next two Fleming letters from Sadie Sibley. So, just as a caveat, these were, well, one of these was so scandalous that I did edit it for content. If you are really desperate to find out what was left out, we do have the originals on display and you can find that out for yourself. But they were a little bit too scandalous for a school-sponsored event. So, all right. June 20th, 1929, Marietta, Georgia. Precious sweetheart, 2 months ago today we were together. Although all the books said no, I have been dreadfully in love with you. It is the Lord's blessing we were miles apart today. I want you dreadfully. I am ladylike, and yet I want you like that. Precious, you always do the sweet thing. I'm so happy you had the window boxes made narrower. I'm a queer person. I think of you and what you are doing when I'm up here, and vice versa. Lois is driving home tomorrow. She has asked another girl, but I could mumble back. You felt dreadfully about my riding there coming up. So as bride's delight will be with me, I declined with thanks. I know you will see that everything at our shining palace will be okay. You know that I love you with all of me, so I should take care of myself. The rough hide the fact that I am a lady home 3 days early, so I feel like nobody loves me. Lois, Eve, and several girls spent the day with us today. Poor old Bernice just had to go on. Bill will arrive Monday, alone. We plan to go to Callie's wedding Wednesday night. Can you come up? I'll go home with you Thursday morning. It seems better than a weekend trip. What say you? I love you always, in all ways. Your own, Sib. Now we have another one. So it's dated June 20th, the same day, /22nd of 1929. So she probably started writing it and then continued on 2 days later. Sweetheart, do you know I was awfully disappointed when you did not come for me Saturday? I found out I'm not so important after all. Sad blow. They say religion is for those unhappy souls. I went on a religious jog today. Sunday school and church. Harry Bryan preached a splendid sermon on ice water. Oh, how I wanted to see my camel-drinking husband. Then I became awfully angry with myself, and you, and life, etc. It's all just a question of adjustment after all. Dad says the bed and table will be ready the last part of this week, if nothing unforeseen comes up. He hasn't done over the bureau. He's the dearest, most thoughtful thing. He has saved lots of money by packing these 1,000,001 things. They are ready. Maybe I'll have some news to tell you Monday. We're going out to Aunt May's for dinner tonight. Lots of people asked after you at Sunday school. When I told them I was letting you have a vacation, they said, "So soon? You have enjoyed it, haven't you, Precious? Being alone with your family, being like you used to be, and swimming and playing tennis and going out with the boys. I've enjoyed my gal visit, but doggone, I can't help missing you." Monday, we spent the day with Marion in Cartersville. Elizabeth Keeler and Jenny say they are coming visiting. Help no more. Help, help. I want you by myself, for a little while at least. Are you coming for me? You'll have to. The $15 you've given me are all gone. I can't walk. But I have come in spirit, down a white moonbeam's path, right in our front door, and together we walk up our stairs to our room, and there you know I'm all yours. They do have a baby about 9 months back.
Surprise.
All right. So, we are on our last letter already. It is our latest letter, so we're jumping ahead from 1929 to 1968. And this is a letter that came to the Richmond County Historical Society via the Augusta History Museum. We don't know a whole lot about the context of it. If you want to come take a look at it, it looks very much like the kind of note you would pass in class, like in high school. We've got stuff in the margins. And this letter, all we know about it is that it is written by two Academy of Richmond County high school students in 1968. And it very clearly reflects the intensity of young love. But we don't have a whole lot to go on. Miranda and I did try and sneakily figure out who these letter writer
From
lovers
yearbooks.
are from the yearbooks. But there are a few Waynes and a few Jans and Janets, so we couldn't be sure. But Miranda will be reading this letter.
So 1968, God, that could possibly like be when my parents were in high school. I think it was more like the 70s, but these people are probably still alive. So
Yeah, we're still alive.
They would be horrified, I'm sure, to know this is being read publicly. But
Although we have no last names, so we cannot
oh yeah,
identify them.
they're no last names.
Yeah.
They're in the yearbook, but we don't know which ones. So 2 Richmond Academy students, a lot was written in the margins, so I'm going to read the margin notes after the letter is sent. So, my dearest darling, I know you're probably asking yourself why in the world I'm starting this note off like I did. Well, it's because that's the exact way I feel toward you. Wayne, even though things have changed for us, that can't stop me from loving you and feeling as I do toward you. It's like I've always said, I didn't learn to love you in one day, and I can't stop loving you in one day. Wayne, there are really no words that I could use to express to you how I feel. Right now you are pretty mixed up, and I hope you don't think you're the only one, because I am just as mixed up, if not more mixed up than you. Wayne, I admit, even though I'm not supposed to, that I'm all but eaten up with jealousy. I can't help it. I know I've never fooled you. You've always known I was jealous, because I know that Laura's looks are far better than mine. Her world is much broader and more providing than mine, and she has many things that I don't and never will have. Her outlooks and interests are broader than mine, and when you're with her, there is always something to do that's different every time, whereas it was the same old thing repeated every time you came over to my house or we went somewhere. Wayne, I've never really felt that we could ever have a falling out, and feel now that we won't unless that's what you want. Is it? I don't know now whether you ever want to date me again. I guess that's up to you. And if you don't want to go to Becky's formal dance with me, please tell me. I'll try to understand. If you don't want to go to the beach ball, dance at the end of school, girl take boy, just tell me. Don't try to spare my feelings, because I'd rather be told now than later when it could be worse. Wayne, I know Laura means more to you than you admit to me. There is nothing I can do to change your feelings for her. And I wouldn't if I could anyway, because if you feel you and Laura will fare better than we will, then that's what I want for you. Wayne, we've been through a lot together. We've shared many wonderful times together. And for all those wonderful times, we have memories that for me will last forever. Only God knows my inner feelings for you, and only He knows how much that I really do love you. And we both know that if He sees it fitting, we'll share a wonderful future together. Always remember, Wayne, even though the going may get rough, my heart is there for you, and I will always love you no matter what. As each day goes by, my love grows deeper for you, even though it doesn't seem to show now. Wayne, you know I've been hurt, but life is full of hurts, and that's one thing we're going to have to face. I hope that you never get hurt, and I hope that through me you've learned that going steady doesn't pay off in the end. There's always hurt involved. Wayne, one day, I still pray that we'll exchange our vows together, and only God knows what a wonderful day that will be for me. These are high school students. I hope that you never make a mistake with any other girl, and right now I can tell you I'll remain as I am now, as you've left me, and be the same way when you come back. My biggest hope is that your love for me will never die, and that it will remain forever and always. Remember, Wayne, I love you, and our future lies in your hands. Yours forever, Jan. And then in the margins, in all caps, just imagine, she's screaming this. Write back and tell me how you feel! Exclamation point. I love you, Wayne. It's not over for us. Understand that's what you want. I didn't mean for it to sound that way at lunch. I love you, Wayne. I regret nothing that has ever happened between us because it was the love that drew us together. Only God knows, and one day you will too.
Who is this Laura girl? I don't like her.
Laura tore them apart.
She's the pretty cheerleader.
I do.
All right. Well, those are all of our letters that we have for you today. Feel free to ask questions if you have questions. You can come up and take a look at the letters, and if you want to do some sleuthing and figure out what I've omitted, we can do that. Please feel free to have some refreshments. We've got tea and coffee and cake and cookies and
So it makes you wonder when, I don't think people write letters as much as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are your age, right? How will that be captured? What's going to go on there? Is it going to be like,
Text.
So there's
Instagram
not,
posts or
yeah. So a lot of these things filter down through history to us through what we call benign neglect in archives. So they just kind of happen to have survived because they're a physical item, and they happen to have kind of made their way to an institution as opposed to staying within a box in somebody's attic. You can't really do benign neglect as much with digital things. So emails, that we do have kind of strategies for archiving emails. We have strategies for archiving tweets and different social media posts, but there's just, if you think about how many texts you send in 1 week, it's different than letters too because they're shorter, but that means there's also a higher volume of them. So there are way more tweets and Instagram posts and text messages and emails than letters, if we're kind of doing what's analogous. So it's a good question. We don't really have an answer. We have an answer for some types of digital media.
And coincidentally, I was telling Melissa this morning, one of my brothers called me, and he's divesting himself of my family memorabilia. And he says he has a box of my mother and my father's love letters to my mom, starting in 1937, going up to about 47. So I was like, that's going to be interesting. You're kind of do you want to read your mother and father's love letters?
Other people would find it interesting because
Yeah.
So, but you think about that corpus of, even from a standpoint of genealogy, those kinds of things, that you're losing out on some of that contextual information.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the whole dating apps situation. A lot of people their earliest communications with a significant other oftentimes happen through an app. And where do those go?
And you think about the language, the difference in the language that was used in those early letters versus that letter on the end there, and you can kind of see there's even differences. You know, it's just a different communication. That's
Yeah, I mean, like our 1865 love letter that Thomas read, there's this whole thing that this man says, like, I know that you don't approve of lover husbands. So essentially he's saying his wife kind of operates under the assumption that, like, you get married and, like, that part of your life just goes away. Like, your romance is dead now. You're married and that's that. We don't need that sentiment in marriage. Marriage is about, you know, like, having a family and providing and all these other things. It's not about the two people. It's not about the couple anymore. Although her husband disagrees a little bit with her on that. He's going to push her on that.
He's interesting because he wants her to indulge in his kind of sentiments.
Yes.
He's like, please take
indulge
this.
me.
Yeah.
Let me write you a poem. You know. And then we have Hugh later, who is just like drunkenly stalking his mistress on Broad Street, like in the afternoon,
he was arrested.
getting arrested in the 1920s, which I think even now, like, we don't think of even the 1920s as having been like a particularly like crazy free love kind of time, but you can see that like the language that they're using definitely changes. It's still like very kind of purple prosy and very a little bit more formal maybe, although I think that also is dependent on the person and the personality, because Sadie Sibley, she's writing in a much more colloquial way in her love letters around the same time in the 1920s, and also in a more explicit way. So I think part of it is personality. She's also younger than Hugh Walker. He was in his later 30s when he was writing his love letters, and he was writing to a much younger woman. So that may have also influenced the kind of language that he chose to use. But yeah, interesting. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you all for coming. Feel free to explore the letters, get some treats.
Thank you.